Good morning, everybody. My name is Jenica Leonard. I am a member of YSC. I am personally a breast cancer survivor. I am also a co-survivor of my mom 3 times, my dad once, and various and sundry friends and family over the years. Cancer has always been a part of my life, but today is not about me. It's about you as a co-survivor. Today we have Christy Case here. Christy is a licensed clinical social worker and she is certified in oncology social work. She has over 15 years of experience working with people and families impacted by cancer and other major illnesses. She has specialized training in cognitive behavioral therapy, meaning-centered psychotherapy, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, also known as EMDR. She works as the outpatient oncology social worker at her local cancer center. She owns a private therapy practice. She also teaches continuing education workshops at local universities. She is a trained yoga teacher and Reiki practitioner, and she incorporates an integrated healthcare approach to her work. So everybody, please welcome Christy Case. Good morning, Christy.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. Well, thank you for the round of applause, David. I appreciate that. If people care to come on camera, you're welcome to. If you're not in a situation for that, that's okay too. So Jenica, thank you so much for the introduction and thank you for being here. And thank you to YSC for having me be a part of this virtual experience. I've done some of this stuff in person, and it's really cool to also do it virtually because hopefully some people that maybe wouldn't have otherwise been able to access it get to be here today. So I hope what you're experiencing so far has been meaningful and impactful and helpful. And hopefully what I'm going to talk about today will also be helpful. I do hope that you will interact with me a little bit. I mean, I can talk all day long if I have to, but I'd rather make sure that people in the group get what they want to get out of this. So one of the things Jenica said is I'm a big fan of really incorporating a lot of holistic work when I work with people. And what I mean by that is making sure that people have tangible tools. And often those tools are things you can easily access because your body already does it on its own. One example is breathing, right? Everyone in here is currently breathing. And it's actually something that if you understand how to work with your breath and maximize how you breathe, it actually can be a fantastic tool to manage some of the stress that comes along with being a co-survivor and loving and supporting people when they're dealing with cancer. So with that being said, I want to just start with a little simple breathing exercise. So one of the things that's really important to understand about breathing exercises is when one can do some deep breathing, what that does is it actually calms down the nervous system. And when it calms down the nervous system, the back part of the brain, which is our survival brain, which can be, you know, kind of where our instincts come into place, where we get overwhelmed, we get stressed out, we get anxious, we get agitated. When we do deep breathing, that part of our brain quiets down. And the front part of our brain, where we can digest information, think logically, understand complex things, comes online and allows us to learn better. So starting with deep breathing hopefully allows everyone to digest this information and get like maximum benefit. So that's why we're going to just start with a simple breathing exercise. There's real science behind that. It is not just a fluke, I promise. So what I would love for people to do is, if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. If not, maybe just kind of a soft gaze or focus your sight on something that you can see. And I want people to just pay attention to the fact that they're breathing. You don't have to do anything special at this moment, but just be aware that there's inhales and exhales happening. That when you inhale and exhale, your body moves. That when you inhale and exhale, your lungs are working, your heart is pumping blood, your circulatory system is working. And then I want to see if you can take a deep inhale and expand your belly. And on your exhale, allow the belly to relax. When you inhale, the belly expands. And as you exhale, the belly relaxes. Inhaling, the belly expands. Be mindful if your chest is also expanding. Exhaling, letting it all relax. We'll do 2 more. Inhaling, feel the belly expand and rise. Exhale, feel it softened and relaxed. And then 1 more, maybe you get an extra sip of air on the inhale. And when you exhale, continue to allow that air to release as much as you can till you feel empty. And then keeping your eyes closed if they're closed, keeping the focus if it's focused on one spot. Just check back in with your body, seeing if you notice anything different. Seeing if anything maybe feels more enjoyable, more comfortable, still feels tight. Just noticing, not fixing, just noticing. All right. And then when you're ready, come back into the space, back to the present moment. So this breathing technique, I'm sure many of you are familiar with deep breathing techniques. It's pretty simple. It does not have to be complicated to get a real benefit from it. A lot of people think, oh, I have to count this many breaths, or I have to be sitting cross-legged and on a yoga mat. You really don't. You can be anywhere, anytime, and no one needs to even know that you're doing it. And what I always like to refer to it as is I say, this is the body's natural Xanax. We have breathing. I'm not saying that Xanax isn't important, that you shouldn't use it if your doctor is recommending you use it, but we have these tools inside of our body that actually help us relax. So I always say breathing techniques are like the body's Xanax. It can calm you down really quickly. You may have to take it, right? Like you do Xanax, you don't just take it once, it doesn't work forever. You have to continuously take it sometimes for certain situations. Breathing's the same thing. Sometimes you have to use it more than once, especially in tense situations. So we're going to move into tense situations. So I would imagine for many of you as co-survivors, there are moments and experiences you've had or maybe are currently having where you might feel particularly stressed out and overwhelmed as a co-survivor. Obviously, the person that's in your life that you love and care about is very important to you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And supporting someone that's dealing with cancer can be a lot to manage depending on your role in that situation. So what I'd like to do for our workshop today is there's going to be a couple different parts. So one part is the group, us discussing how do you know when you feel really activated or stressed out or overwhelmed? And then what are some things that can be done to help manage or maybe even minimize that feeling or that experience of feeling stressed out and overwhelmed? And then we're going to talk about just like some real basic stuff that people can do. Again, I'm not a fan of making it really complicated. I like people to walk away with some real, like, simple, tangible stuff that they can incorporate. And then at the end, we're going to do what's called a grounding technique. Again, something, a real easy, accessible tool that you can use anywhere, anytime, and no one even needs to be knowing that you're doing it. The cool thing about all these skills is they're all free. They're all accessible. You can use them as much or as little as you want. And they're all really simple. So maybe you've heard some of this stuff before, maybe it'll be all new to you, but whatever the case, there's always an opportunity to tweak it and learn if needed. So one of the challenges that I think happens for co-survivors is when you feel really activated, right? Or overwhelmed or stressed out, sometimes the ability to take care of oneself kind of goes off the rails, right? Sometimes people don't sleep enough, they don't eat enough, they don't exercise enough. They are maybe overworking to manage stress. So everyone kind of copes with stress and overwhelmed and feeling overwhelmed in different ways. But I think one of the really important things about that is understanding and knowing what actually activates you in the first place. So then we maybe have a chance at trying to minimize that from happening. So, for those of you who feel comfortable sharing, I'd be curious to know when you feel activated, and I use the word activated, I don't use the word triggered, but I'm sure many of you have heard that word. What I mean by activated is your blood is pumping, your heart's racing, you might feel a pit in your stomach, you're maybe doing an activity repetitively to try to manage the stress, but the general kind of like, oh gosh, I'm not feeling calm, centered, and relaxed, whatever is opposite of that for you. Do you know what activates you? And if you do, can you share with the group what actually activates you so that we can maybe understand how we try to manage that activation in a different way? So anyone in the room care to share about anything that activates you? It could be when you're in a particular emotional state, like feeling sad or lonely. Maybe it's physically, like I haven't had enough sleep or my back really hurts. Like what activates people?
Well, I can start. I know I'm the moderator, but I don't like that air. My kids fighting activates me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would imagine that's a big one for a lot of parents. Anyone else?
You named the big one already, just feeling tired.
Tired, right? Yeah, that's a big one. When I think about tired, I think about for anyone that either has kids or has been around kids, especially like toddlers, when they are tired, oh boy, like you got to be ready for like all hell to break loose, essentially, right? When kids are tired, like they become impatient, they become demanding, they become like highly emotional, right? And what adults oftentimes forget is like we're just in a bigger body, but we have the same stuff. Like when adults are tired, the same thing happens. We probably behave in a little bit more of a socially acceptable way. We're not like throwing ourselves on the ground in the middle of the store and screaming necessarily, but we still have that activation and we can still become impatient, irrational, difficult to be around when we're really tired. Yes, that's one of my big ones. Boy, oh boy, does it goes sideways real fast when I get tired. Anyone else in the group care to share what makes what they recognized in terms of when they start to feel really activated? How about at the oncologist office? Anyone feel particularly activated when they're in the oncology office. If you want, you can also share in the chat if you don't feel comfortable, speaking. All right, well, I'm impressed if no one feels activated in the oncologist office, because I work with them and I see it all day long, where people feel pretty stressed out when they're waiting for an appointment.
So Jacob said work stress, and to your question, I will also add, for me as a survivor, but anybody who's been in the chemo infusion room, just the smell of the hep lock and the alcohol, like all of those hospital-y smells are just totally ruined for me. And I have a very keen sense of smell. So all of those chemo adjacent smells and sights and beeping and all that.
Yeah. So yes. So one of the things about feeling really activated is sometimes it's a very obvious activation, right? Like waiting in the waiting room at the oncologist's office. I think anyone who loves someone that's been dealing with cancer would say that they probably feel activated there. Or maybe before you're getting on an airplane, right? Like common things. But then they're not necessarily small, but they're not necessarily the things that people are acutely aware of, like the smell when they get a certain procedure done, or the silence when you ask the doctor a question and they're thinking about how they want to respond to you, or like the demeanor at which someone approaches you, or whether or not you can't find a parking spot that you want to find when you go to the hospital, right? There are there are kind of the seemingly small things that people can also feel really activated by, and those small things build up to be big things. And then sometimes there are just the big, obvious, big things that are in the room. So yes, work stress, family stress, financial stress is a very common one, especially for young people. Having to navigate all the different relationships, doctor, maybe there's a partner, maybe there's a friend, maybe there's a parent, right? Maybe there's a boss, right? There's a lot of different relationships to navigate when you're dealing with cancer. And that can be quite stressful and overwhelming and activated from people. Because when you do love someone or care about someone that's going through cancer treatment, or maybe has even finished cancer treatment, there's a lot of players involved in that. And that means there's a lot of personalities involved in that. And that means a lot of those personalities could be experiencing some stress as well. So people will get really activated and kind of start to get really stressed out by one another. So sometimes it's a physical state that one is in that you feel really activated, like tired. For me, the other one is also hungry. When I start getting into the hangry area, like, yep, it's gonna blow up. This is not going in a good direction. But then there are things like people and places and situations. Maybe you're waiting for your loved one to get a call back from the doctor about the scan results, right? Or whether or not do you have to go to the ED tonight based on these symptoms that one's having, right? So there's some situations or some places you feel really activated. And then there might just be kind of the situations of dealing with family, dealing with work, right? Dealing with these kinds of units that get interacted with on a day-to-day basis. Depending on the situation, one can feel really activated. So the reason why I bring that up is because it's helpful to know what those activation things are for you so that you can go into it with more awareness, right? So there's something that the phrase I like to use is looking for the signposts, right? So for any of you that drive or maybe even take public transportation, when you see a red light, you're supposed to stop. When you see a yield sign, you're supposed to slow down. That the lines in the road means stay in this lane, right? There are these signposts that occur while driving to help you stay safe. There are signposts that are happening as you go about your day that are going to clue you into whether or not if you should push harder, if you're going to feel more stressed, or if you should pull back and get back to safety. So these signposts are really important to pay attention to because they're probably going to help mitigate feeling really overwhelmed, feeling really stressed out. Now, obviously, cancer is a stressful experience. You can't mitigate all the stress of cancer. It's impossible. But there are ways to be really aware of what are the things that I get really activated by so that I can maybe prepare a little bit better so that I can minimize that activation. So this also closely ties into this idea of burnout. So maybe you guys have heard the phrase caregiver burnout. It's a very real thing. Burnout is usually closely related to the degree of self-sacrifice that you have. So the more I sacrifice my well-being to take care of another, the more burnt out I will likely become. Because sacrifice is exactly what it is, right? Sacrifice can get dangerous sometimes. That doesn't mean that you can't show up. That doesn't mean that you just selfishly only focus on yourself, but it does mean that you're paying attention to the signposts, because if you're getting more into self-sacrifice mode or martyrdom roles, you want to be really careful because that's going to be the danger zone. And again, the more you sacrifice your well-being, the more burnt out you will become. And that usually means the more activated you are, the more resentful you are, the more difficult you are to tolerate your own company and maybe the company around others. So being really mindful of how much you're sacrificing can help you hopefully manage the outward expression of how that might go. And really the two things that I know that are one of the biggest antidotes to self-sacrifice and burnout is self-care and taking care of yourself. And the other one is boundaries. So these are very popular words in the world, but they're really, really important. And they do mean something. And there's a reason why people talk about them so much is because they're really beneficial. So something to know about boundaries is boundaries are actually not about other people. We often think like, I'm setting this boundary, you can't cross over it, you don't get to come into this space, right? But really what that's about is you don't get to come into this space because I'm taking care of myself. So the boundary is actually for your well-being. It's actually not to keep others away or keep others in alignment with what you need or keep others in check. It's actually for your well-being that you're setting the boundaries. It just so happens the other people, places, and things may have an experience as a result of that, but really the boundaries are for your well-being. So some ideas I have around boundaries. One, reducing exposure to the activating thing or things. Now, someone mentioned work stress. Obviously, you're probably not going to be like, you know what, I'm just not going to work anymore. And that will just reduce my exposure to work stress. It doesn't work like that. But maybe that does mean you have some boundaries at work of not taking on new tasks or asking for help, or really assessing whether this job is right for you, right? So reducing exposure to certain circumstances can help you to have better boundaries so that you manage the burnout that may occur. An example might be for a lot of people, when you're the primary caregiver, you go to every single appointment with your loved one. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad idea. That can be a great idea. But do you have to go to every single one of them? Maybe you just go to the more bigger ones, right? Or maybe you take 1 week off. Or maybe you say, I'll drop you off and pick you up at the appointment, but I'm going to sit in the car for a little while, right? So it's not that it's an all or nothing, but it is something to be more mindful of depending on how much resource and how much reserve you have. One of the ones I like to offer people, especially if you're in a partnership and you live with your partner, or even if you don't live with your partner, is no cancer talk at certain times of the day. If you're someone that likes to start your morning really calm and really slowly and really simply, I don't recommend talking about cancer first thing in the morning. That's probably going to activate you. Or if you know you feel tired and you want to get a good night of sleep, you probably want to limit talking about cancer after 6 p.m. or after 8 p.m. so that you can get a good night of sleep, right? So it's more about being mindful of like, I get really activated around these things. And so I need to be really careful with the boundaries I set and maybe reduce exposure to times or situations that work for me. Another one is planning. So what are you going to do when you feel activated? Because you will feel activated at some point in time, because that's the nature of human being. So what do you want to do when that stuff starts to happen? Do you want to call a friend? Do you want to leave the room? Do you want to come up with maybe what I like to call a non-inflammatory response? And what I mean by that is like, okay, right? Maybe someone's like, I need you to blank, and I need you to do this, and I need you to do that. Okay, right? Or like, thanks for letting me know, or I appreciate that, or I don't think that's going to work for me today, actually, right? Like coming up with some responses that are really simple but profound, but don't create more activation for you, and maybe don't create more activation for others. So sometimes no response is the best response, but if you can't give no response, can you give something kind of boring like, okay, or thanks for telling me, or you might be right about that, right? Of just, can you keep it really simple so that it doesn't inflame the situation more? Jenica posted a couple of acronyms that I really like. And these acronyms are really, really great. I'm a big fan of acronyms because when I start to feel stressed out, like, nope, all thinking goes offline and I can't really access rational thought. But sometimes I can actually access these acronyms. And so there's a couple that she posted. One is an acronym that's called HALT, HALT, stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So David, you might really like this one. And the acronym HALT tells you exactly what to do. HALT, stop what you're doing and address one of those things. Or maybe you're having all four of those things. Or maybe you're having two. Maybe you're hungry and maybe you're tired, right? So being really mindful that those are basic needs that humans have. And when those needs are going unmet, humans are just much more likely to get really activated, overwhelmed, and stressed out. So if you start to feel that way, you can think of this of like, okay, what's that acronym? HALT. Okay, am I hungry, angry, lonely, tired? All right, let's say I'm really hungry right now. All right, let me stop what I'm doing and I'm going to go get a snack and then I'll come back, right? The cool thing about HALT is you can add a letter onto it. So like you can add S, halts, right? Maybe S stands for sick. Maybe you're not feeling well today. Maybe your loved one's not feeling well today and you want to use sick, right? So being mindful of your basic needs, if those are not being met, you're much more likely to feel activated and overwhelmed. And if you can tend to that need, you will likely mitigate or at least minimize somewhat feeling really activated and overwhelmed, AKA burnt out. So Jenica, I know it's about to be 12:30. I'm looking at the time. Okay. Another one I really love is Q-tip. For some people, they literally carry a Q-tip in their pocket, and this stands for quit taking it personal. So anyone that's ever loved and cared about someone that's dealing with cancer has probably seen them go through, mood swings, up and down, good days, bad days. And sometimes it feels like, oh my gosh, like they hate me. What did I do wrong? Or they're stressed out and upset and like, I'm trying to be helpful. What the heck, right? Or they're having all these feelings and like, I don't know what the heck to do with all of this. So Q-tip's really good because it tells you to quit taking it personal. It might not be about you at all. Even if it has your name on it, it still might not be about you. So can you quit taking it personal and go on and take care of yourself? The other one I love is JADE, stands for justify, argue, defend, or explain. The reason I like this is because when people are learning about their boundaries and starting to set boundaries, you do not have to justify, argue, defend, or explain why you need to take care of yourself, right? Everyone deserves to take care of themselves. And what that looks like is different for everybody, but you do not have to self-sacrifice yourself over and over and over again. It will burn you out as a co-survivor, and then you probably won't be able to be of much help. So if anyone gives you some kind of pushback, if you're like, hey, I'm going to go for a walk for the next hour, and someone's like, yeah, but you got to be here. Okay, well, I'll be back in an hour. I think things are going to be okay until I come back in an hour, right? You don't have to justify, well, I went to this workshop and they told me that I need to take care of myself. And as a result of it, I need to go for an hour walk. It's like, no, you don't have to justify it. You don't have to argue it. You don't have to defend it. You don't have to explain it. If you need to take care of yourself, you need to take care of yourself. I understand there are circumstances where that's really challenging, depending on your role in the caregiving, but usually there's more than one caregiver when you're loving someone and supporting someone through cancer. So can you see if someone else can maybe step in? Or is it something that like you think you have to do, but maybe you don't actually really have to do? Maybe you don't have to be the only person that does this, or maybe someone else is going to do it and you're going to have to tolerate them doing it wrong because you need to go and take some time for yourself, right? So I'm a big fan of Jade. If you do not have to justify, argue, or defend, or explain yourself. My other favorite one, which is not an acronym, it's just a statement, which is no is a complete sentence. If you need to say no, you need to say no. And that's okay to say. It's a complete sentence. You don't have to Jade in order to follow up on what that no is. You just get to say no. And again, I recognize some situations are really hard. So it's important to look for those opportunities where you can set boundaries to take care of yourself. And that doesn't always look like I'm going to go on a week-long, retreat to center myself in the Bahamas. It might be you're going to go in for your appointment. I know you're going to probably be in the waiting room waiting for 20 minutes. So I'm just going to chill out in the car and like listen to some music. Maybe it sounds like that. Or, it's 12:30 on Saturday and I'm just going to go take a nap for like 30 minutes, right? Or maybe even just close my eyes for 10 minutes, right? Or the next time, you're getting chemo, I'm going to make sure I go to the gift shop and just kind of like look around and just kind of get out of the environment. Maybe I'm not going to buy anything. Maybe I am. But can you look for the really, really small opportunities to just give yourself the little bit of space that you might need for that day? I saw something in the chat. I just want to, yes, thank you for posting that, Jenica. No is a complete sentence. And then some other kind of tips and ideas I have is like, can you stick to the basics? Like, have you had enough hydrating liquids for the day? Did you get to rest enough? That doesn't always mean sleep, but it might mean rest. Like I'm going to hang out for 20 minutes and just go sit somewhere else while you go to that appointment. So can you just rest a little bit more? Have you laughed at all lately? Right? Laughter often goes right out the window when cancer enters the picture because it's really stressful. So like, do you have a favorite comedian you like to listen to? Do you want to go to a comedy show? Do you want to watch a stand-up special on Netflix? There's so much out there that might help you to get access to that laughter, because laughter is one way the body discharges energy and makes people feel more calm and relaxed again. Have you taken a shower that day? Maybe you already did, but maybe you want to go in there because it's the one place you can go and be left alone. So maybe you'd like to go take an extra shower for that day. And how I like to think about it is, let's say you're taking care of a kid, right? They need to eat. They love snacks. They want to watch fun stuff on an iPad or a television show. They want to read books or have books read to them. Like, have you read a book lately? They need their diaper changed. Have you gone to the bathroom? It's amazing what happens when you feel really stressed out as a caregiver, that you've just like completely shut down your own needs sometimes, and you're waiting and you're wondering and you're like, oh my gosh, like I've had to go to the bathroom for like 20 minutes and I haven't even thought about that, or I haven't even addressed it. So some of the real basic stuff like liquids, eating, bathroom, rest, laughter, like if those things are also being tended to, you're much less likely to burn out. And then again, it's really looking for the opportunities of when can you squeeze those things in if it feels like time is really tight, right? So maybe before you go to bed at night, you know, down some hydrating liquids, right? Or maybe when if you're a public transportation person and you're walking to the next train station or walking or waiting for the bus, like, do you just want to listen to some cool music, or do you want to listen to a podcast on Spotify? So just really, really simple stuff that you can weave through your day, that even if you do it for 5 minutes or less, still might be beneficial for you. I know I'm one of those people that, like, I'll start a Netflix stand-up special, but I'll never watch the whole thing in one sitting. So maybe I watch 10 minutes and I like get 10 minutes of relief. Okay, well, that's better than no minutes of relief. So I'm curious to hear from people. Do you have any boundaries that you stick to, or maybe you're thinking that you would like to incorporate now that you've heard some of what I've talked about? Or any like self-care stuff that you do that's like, yeah, when I do this, I always feel a little bit more like myself, or I feel a little more rested and relaxed. Does anyone have anything they tend to do?
I can start us off again. I know when my mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, I allowed myself about 5 minutes of pretty rage-directed crying. So I would have a playlist in my car that I know would elicit strong reactions from myself. And so when I was on the way to drive down to my parents, which is about an hour and a half away, I would put it on, get my boo-hoos out. It's probably the opposite of laughing, but for me, laughter with a dark sense of humor comes pretty easy. Crying and rage, not so much. So that's how I trigger myself intentionally to get that out, because otherwise there was just no time or space for me to feel bad about myself.
Fantastic. I love a good rage scream in the car session. I do it very regularly. I'm like, yep, I got to discharge some energy or it's going to come out sideways at people. So I'm just going to have to sit in here and scream as loud as I can, and then it'll be over. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
David, I saw you go to unmute. You have anything?
It's kind of different, but I enjoy cycling, and just taking the time to do that and get away from the situation and being out in nature.
Yeah, that's a great one. Physical activity is a great, great tool to help manage stress and to help manage feeling kind of burned out as a caregiver. So yeah, so sometimes the answer is rest, and sometimes the answer is opposite of rest, which is like go out there, be active, do something. Being in nature is a great tool. For us city folks like myself, you know, nature's not always super accessible, but can you like go and sit in a park and just like sit underneath a tree, right? So yeah, that's a great one, David. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, also can help you to sleep better.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're discharging the energy that feels like it's like pulsating through your body, that has to come out somehow. And in order for that to come out, you got to figure out what are the things you like to do to get it out. Because yeah, if you don't get it out, it tends to just kind of like keep swimming in there, and that keeps people up late at night. Yeah.
And then Jacob put in the chat, we made a point to continue doing a date night at least once a month. So
I love
with your partner.
that. Yeah, right. If you're romantically linked to your person, yeah, like, is the romance still there? Are you still connecting in the ways that maybe you used to connect before cancer, or really just want to connect now? Because connection matters, right? It's not always just connecting with oneself. Sometimes it's connecting with other people. So I love that you're still doing date night. That is really important.
Mhm.
Mhm. Anything else anyone wants to add? No? Okay. So we have 5 minutes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to end with what's called a grounding exercise. So a grounding exercise is something that allows you to feel connected to yourself and connected to the environment that you're in. And really what it's doing is it's bringing a hyper sense of awareness to what is around you to activate your five senses so that you can get really present. When people feel stressed out or anxious or overwhelmed, there's often a ruminating about the past that's going on or a worrying about the future that's going on, or maybe both if you're lucky enough to get both of those things. So grounding exercises are great things that you can do to stay present, to be in the here and now. That doesn't mean that things aren't going to be stressful or that you're not going to think about things or that you're not going to get overwhelmed, but at least gives you a few minutes of reprieve to just get present in the present moment. Because that's truly the only place where you actually have control. You cannot go back and change the way things were. You can't go forward necessarily and manipulate how it's all going to go, but you can be present. And you do have some control over that, which is what a lot of people are feeling like they don't have when they're dealing with cancer and supporting someone with cancer, is people don't feel like they have a whole lot of control in this situation. So grounding exercises are a great tool to use to feel a sense of control. So we're going to do a really easy one. I call it the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you type that in on Google, you will see it come up everywhere. And essentially what it is it helps you use your five senses in a few different ways to activate a sense of calming and a sense of presence and a sense of control. So what I want people here to do is I want everyone to just look around wherever they are sitting right now or standing or walking. And I want you to just, in your mind, name 5 things that you can see. Then I want you to look for 4 things that you can physically touch. And that might mean like, I feel my butt on the chair. It doesn't have to be like I use my fingers to touch something. It could be your feet touching something or any part of the body, your glasses touching your nose. Is there something that you can feel the weight of, the texture of, the tactileness of in your environment? So those are 4 things that you can touch or that are touching you. And then 3 things you can hear. So that might be my voice. That might be a car outside. If you're like me, it might be your cat meowing in the background, hoping she doesn't come in and interrupt this. So 3 things you can hear. And then 2 things you can smell. Sometimes closing your eyes for this helps that sense get really, really clear. Or maybe you have more of a sensitivity to smell anyway, and you can smell 2 things. And then 1 thing you can taste. Sometimes closing the eyes or just kind of moving the tongue around the mouth or rolling your tongue across your teeth. 1 thing you can taste. So again, this is called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can play around with what you do with it, right? Like I'm someone, my hearing is like I've got like, you know, animalistic instinct hearing, so I can hear things miles away. So for me, doing 5 things I can hear is actually really easy for me. That's kind of my most intense sense that I have. And so however you want to play around with those numbers, you can. But again, it's free, easy to use. No one needs to know that you're doing it. It's very accessible for people anywhere, anytime. You could do it before bed, you could do it in the car, you could do it in the doctor's appointment, you could do it during, your loved ones having chemo, right? But again, it helps people to get current, get into the present moment, helps you feel more grounded in your environment, helps you feel back in control when you might feel out of control. So it's a great tool to use. You can do breathing and then do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or the reverse, or just pick one randomly throughout the day. But if you're starting to see those signposts, those signs are blaring, hey, we're getting into the danger zone, things are getting overwhelming, or I'm starting to feel stressed out and burned out, this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or the breathing technique, they're really, really simple tools that allow you to bring your brain back online so that you can feel yourself in your body and get present and get more calm.
Great. Thank you, Christy. I do think we're running out of time. I just wanted to remind everybody that's here, first of all, thank you for being here. There will be evaluations sent to you via email. And if you fill that out, complete your evaluation, you will be entered into a drawing to win a gift card of $50. I also, again, want to thank Christy for being here, and I highly recommend, as both a survivor and a co-survivor, to remind some of your support system about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. When I find myself very backed into a corner and I reach out to one of my girlfriends who's also trauma informed, they will remind me of this, and I just get a text that says 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that's my reminder to do the exercise, because I'm not very good at remembering my tools when it does come crunch time. And so having people who are in your life that isn't necessarily your survivor partner or your survivor family member to remind you to do those techniques is super duper helpful. And Christy, thank you so much. If anybody has last questions, now's your time. Otherwise, I will say thanks everybody for coming. As a survivor, we appreciate you co-survivors. We literally could not do this without you. So thank you for being here. And thank you, Christy.
Thank you. Thanks for the tip to remind people to get someone to tell them to do this stuff. That's a great tip. It was nice to meet you all.